This program is designed to provide general information with regards to the subject matters covered. This information is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, sponsors, or station are engaged in rendering any specific and personal, medical, financial, legal, counseling, professional service, or any advice. You should seek the services of competent professionals before applying or trying any suggested ideas.
Good morning, truth seekers and true crime junkies. Nanette, Barto here again with Hit the Road Jack, Finding the Zodiac. We are going to cover some related murders to the Cheri Jo Bates crime that we talked about last week and the couple weeks before. I'd like to welcome in Nolan Del Campo, attorney at law, again here to talk about some of these crimes.
Good morning, Nanette.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It looks
Awesome.
like you've got a little lag now going too. It's weird.
Do I?
Audio, yeah.
Well, from my end, it looks fine. It must be you.
It's slight. Maybe it's just my feed. I don't know.
Right. Maybe. All right.
Your voice
Well,
sounds funny.
yeah. No, thank you.
You look good.
Sweet. It's one of those mornings I probably had about 3 hours of sleep. Yay, me.
Yeah. I woke up at 2 this morning. Couldn't get back to sleep.
Yeah.
Anyway.
On to the business at hand. Okay, so basically we're going to bring up the presentation and we're going to climb back into a murder that we actually already talked about. In my research of the Cheri Jo Bates case, I found additional information, and this is not me just saying that I believe this murder is connected to the Cheri Jo Bates crime, but law enforcement as well. So as I was searching through the Cheri Jo Bates evidence, I also found that there were indications that they also believed that other murders were connected. So I hopped backwards a little bit to 1963. On June 4th of 1963, we had a double murder in a secluded area with Robert Domingos and Linda Edwards. It's a beach near Gaviota, California, which is the Santa Barbara area roughly. Some of the things that we did know that we talked about is that there was ammunition found at the crime scene that matched lot numbers that were found at Vanden Air Force Base. So there was that military connection once again, peeking its little head out. I did bring in this little insert. This you're going to find is actually evidence in the Lake Berryessa murders, but I thought that it was probative to bring it in because we keep talking about this pre-cut white cord that the Zodiac Killer and many of these other crimes have included. And whenever I see that there was a pre-cut white cord involved, obviously it goes into the presentation as a consistent MO for this killer. Wouldn't you say that would be fair, Nolan?
Yes, I would agree. I was going to bring that up if you didn't. That's one of the things I remembered about this. There was rope involved and a gun involved.
Correct. So let me move on into the evidence. Actually, I ran a check on them just like I ran a check on Cheri Jo Bates. And I don't know if you recall or not, Nolan, I'd mentioned that I wasn't able to actually come up with a file on her in FOIA.
Yes, I remember that.
So when I ran her last name, I came up with these cases, some of the stuff that we're actually talking about that's going throughout this period. So when I actually ran the check on Robert Domingos, I only came up with actually one case file, which I didn't get into because obviously I can go down a rabbit hole with all of these. But I just wanted to mention it's called Solo, part 122 of 125. And it says Operation Solo was a long-running FBI program to infiltrate the Communist Party of the United States and gather intelligence about its relationship to, well, and of course it carries on, and I didn't capture that information, but have you heard of this Solo?
Not by that name, but the FBI's war on both the Communist Party and the ideology of communism has gone on forever, even prior. Well, Hoover was one of the founder. But so FBI's had a war on communism forever.
Correct. And it kind of fits right in. I mean, obviously, communism is the heart of Harriet Suchet's claims of her cryptic messages, is that Jack is going around tying up loose ends in regards to everything having to do with JFK and RFK and things of that nature, which might also solidify that he had inside information when he mailed the letter in regards to JFK.
Yes, it could.
So when I did an actual check on Linda Edwards, once again, I didn't find anything that specifically came up with her, but I did find it interesting to note that I began, and I don't know if you can see these, Nolan, but some of the case files that I see are Huey Percy. If any of this stands out to you, you let me know with your history and knowledge. Huey Percy Newton, Leroy Eldridge Cleaver, Cartha DeLoach. Do you know any of these?
Yes. Huey Newton and Bobby Seale founded the Black Panther Party in Oakland.
Oh.
And Eldridge Cleaver came on later as the Minister of Information for the Black Panther Party.
So this is kind of fitting.
Okay. And Cartha DeLoach was a high-ranking member of the FBI under Hoover.
Gotcha. So, and one of the things that I'm noting, obviously, is that falls right on in with COINTELPRO, correct?
Yes.
Which is the operation where they were bugging all of these individuals because they thought that they were communism or communists?
Well, that was the alleged guys. They were trying to suppress any movement whatsoever and to discredit whatever movements, the Black Power movement, the Chicano student movement. What they do is they label them communists to discredit them. So
kind of like
they actually believe they're communists or not, they use that as a tactic, shall we say.
Gotcha. And so that would be kind of like when they say we are conspiracy theorists because we think this all fits in together as a neat little puzzle. So we're labeled too, so we look crazy as well.
Yes, yeah.
Well, I wasn't shocked to see that Texarkana Phantom. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. One little point about the whole labeling of communism. Many of the most famous politicians in American history have made their names by attacking communism or communists in the government. For instance, Nixon was one of McCarthy's cronies, and he was a big anti-communist. Ronald Reagan, he was head of the Screen Actors Guild, and he was a spy for Hoover at that point to try and weed out communists from Hollywood. And then governor of California made his name as anti-communist.
And that Edmund Brown?
Same thing, yeah.
Is that Edmund Brown?
No, that was Ronald Reagan.
Well, gotcha. When he acted as governor.
Governor, yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, so, I mean, honestly speaking, if communism is their way to keep people from promoting their own rights, i.e., like you said, the Hispanic or the African-American individuals who were looking to gain rights. So them wanting those rights caused these people to feel like they were acting in a communist way.
That's what the powers that be wanted the public to believe, because any move towards some sort of organized movement with socialistic tendencies that has as its goal a more equal distribution of wealth and more freedom and fairness for all, that the rich elite don't want that. That's the same thing with the CIA. Their whole deal was socialism and communism internationally. That's all they wanted to fight. They didn't care about anything else. And because by doing that, they were protecting the most powerful, richest, brutal interests in the world. That's why after World War II, the CIA and much of the military-industrial establishment was more concerned about Russia and socialism and what they called communism than they were about Nazism and fascism.
Wow. Nothing shocks me anymore. But included in this search, actually, Texarkana Phantom Moonlight Murders came up, part 1 of 2. I wasn't aware that they actually had. I keep looking for these individuals under their names and finding that they've actually labeled them under the killer's name, which I thought was interesting. Do you know why they would do that?
I have no idea.
So
these names
strange.
came up when you just did a search on the Texarkana murder. These particular names. Oh, okay.
I actually searched Linda Edwards. So up here in the top left-hand corner, we can see my search query. And so I was looking up Robert Domingos and Linda Edwards. Under Robert Domingos, the only thing that came up was something in regards to communism, that program Solo. And then when I ran her name, of course, I didn't come up with anything under her name, or they didn't label it as some specific murder out of Santa Barbara. But I came up with things like Texarkana Phantom Moonlight Murders, part 1 of 2. I was not aware that that existed. So I'm obviously going to be doing some backtracking. I want to say there's roughly about 1,000 pages in the FOIA file, and probably 95% of them won't actually have any information that I can glean, but I might find something in there. We also seen things like Rodney King pop up. I thought, what in the world? Why is there any relation or association? I know that when I did it on Bates and I couldn't find any information under her name, when I just ran the last name Bates, I actually came up with files, including the Zodiac, in which case she was mentioned in at some point. So I'm wondering what inside of these files causes this search query to actually draw in these cases. And last but not least, Richard Ramirez. I mean, come on, what is the deal here? Some of the other.
So that's an FBI program?
Yes. This is the Vault. It's called the Vault, and it's the FOIA archives. So some additional. What's that? It
might be the purpose of some of that might be disinformation.
Could be.
Or just to add to the confusion.
Well,
so
I seen
can't get directly to what they're looking for.
Exactly. That's how I felt once I seen the actual part 1 of part 2 of the Texarkana Phantom. It was 500 pages alone in that one file. So I'm assuming there's probably another additional 300 to 500 pages in that second file. And again, it's so heavily darkened by their copying process and so heavily redacted that I'm not sure what one is supposed to actually glean from that information. It also showed up with National Airlines Flight 967. I'm not really sure what that one was about, but I've seen it come up more than once now. So it actually came up in Cheri Jo Bates' search query, and now it's coming up in Linda Edwards' search query. Attached to that as well is Senator Edward Ted Kennedy. D.B. Cooper. I was shocked to see D.B. Cooper because, again, I mean, I'm sure they thought D.B. Cooper was a communist as well, right? Hillary Clinton, another great political figure listed in here. As I went on through the search items, I came up with the 9/11 interviews, the Amerithrax Committee, part 19 of 59, which was their purported investigation into it. And we can see again, COINTELPRO shows up. Mm-hmm. So Church of Scientology, Senator Edward Ted Kennedy again, Watergate, Amerithrax. I was like really shocked to see these little queries pop up.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's all over the board.
But it is all over the board.
Each of those separate little names or categories are all really interesting in and of themselves.
And somehow weave their way throughout Jack's life. So I'm not shocked to see it. I just thought it was interesting when I tried to run their name that's what I came up with. So basically, when I got into some of the other research in Cheri Jo Bates, I found a press release from the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Department. It was issued in 1972. It basically said, in response to inquiries that I have received regarding the recent investigation into the 1963 murders of Linda Edwards and Robert Domingos, I would like to make the following announcement. He said the teenage couple was found shot to death near an isolated stretch of beach north of Santa Barbara. Some other things that I thought were rather interesting is that they make the statement, considerable evidence points to the murders of Linda Edwards and Robert Domingos as being the work of the infamous Zodiac. I wanted to ask you specifically about that, Nolan, because they talk about considerable evidence, and in the lawyer world, what does considerable evidence usually mean?
Well, it means that they would have enough to perhaps get an arrest warrant. But considerable is different than probable. So I would think that it would tend to make one investigate further.
Gotcha. So considerable
Like,
evidence isn't something that's stronger than probable, because they're not saying he probably did. They're saying there's considerable evidence that points to the Zodiac.
Right, but it means that someone within that department thinks there's a definite link, but they don't have enough evidence yet. So what it tells me is that they're going to look further into it. They can't just drop the ball.
It says a recent development has provided information that appears somewhat promising. Considerable evidence points to the murders. Although the anticipated response to this statement would be one of skepticism, let me say that we do not make this assertion frivolously. Many hundreds of hours over the past several months have been spent compiling information concerning the possibility that this man could have been responsible for the killings in 1963. Sheriff's detectives have met with the investigators from those areas where Zodiac has, admittedly, been responsible for several murders. These agencies have conducted intensive investigations for the past several years in an effort to identify the Zodiac. After conferring with officers in these other jurisdictions, we have found that there appears to be a high degree of probability that this subject is responsible for the double murder in our country, or in our county. So there's those words.
Okay, high degree of probability is way more than considerable evidence. High degree of probability, now you're talking to the point where you can get search warrants and things like that. We're talking reasonable suspicion, probable cause, those types of standards. This seems like it's beyond a reasonable suspicion. This almost looks like a probable cause type, which would lead the authority to get warrants and other things, even an arrest warrant, but they don't have a suspect. They have
I was just going to say, so they're not really
an entity, but not a human being, not a person, not a name.
Right. So if they're just considering the facts or the evidence in the case alone in regards to Dominguez and Edwards and Cheri Jo Bates or the Zodiac, let's say, then there must have been something that solidified in their mind to say they had a high degree of probability that they're the same.
What I'm curious about, and I know I've read stuff about this because I know that both Riverside and Santa Barbara and actually San Diego area, I think it might have been Oceanside where the other double murder took place, but they shared a lot of information with Vallejo and San Francisco because they seem to be more convinced than the powers that be in Northern California that the work in Southern California was the handiwork of the person or people that were considered to be Zodiac. So it's what did the people in Northern California and what did the FBI do with the information to try and link it all together? Right.
And that's what keeps bringing me back. And we're going to talk about some of that evidence as we move through the other two murders that you were talking about. He also says several significant similarities between our case and the others, as well as other evidence, which I am not at liberty to disclose at this time, all tend to connect Zodiac with this crime. So what type of evidence do you think they would be keeping from us?
Hard to say. I mean, because if you want to catch your suspect, then you want to throw out as many clues as you can. So if there's someone out there that might be a potential witness or might have some incriminating information or even just any clues whatsoever, you would want them to come forward. So withhold information, that seems a bit odd, but maybe they just wanted to run it by, say, the FBI and the Northern California authorities first. I don't know. It's tantalizing to use that information, but it leaves the reader hanging. Well, what?
Right.
And
well, we know that they oftentimes keep or withhold some portion of the evidence in order to solidify or verify or validate, should I say, if an individual was to come forward with pertinent information that would conclude that they were telling the truth, it would be something that they would have withheld. And I want to give you a for instance in that case. So we have seen all these years, the Zodiac hood has been shown as being black with a white Zodiac symbol in it. And the hood that Dennis found actually showed that there was a golden kind of mustard colored yellow hand sewn Zodiac symbol on the hood. So would that be a little bit of the information they might withhold? They describe the hood, but not necessarily tell you how it was made?
Yes, it's a tactic often used, like you said, because whether it's a witness, they're trying to see if the witness has correct information, or whether it's a suspect himself and they're interrogating the suspect, or whether it's someone they've already apprehended. If they know certain information that wasn't disclosed, then they know they got their person, or they know the potential witness is telling the truth.
Gotcha.
That's
so
right,
that
too,
leads me.
It's a fine line, though, too, because you want to put out as much as you can without, showing your full hand. It's a game of poker, basically.
Right, but at the same time, when they're not putting out the accurate information, that always leads, I think that's what leads a lot of these armchair detectives and these individuals who think they're investigating this case to make assumptions or conclusions based on what they've been told, because they believe that the FBI or law enforcement would be telling them the truth. So they really do need to understand that they tell them the truth to a limited extent, correct?
Yes.
So as I went through...
One quick point, but here we are 50 years later, and I haven't heard anything more further about the investigation down in Santa Barbara.
Yeah, it's been since 2013, I think they had indicated, Chris Hopkins with the FBI had indicated they were going to be closing the case on Jack. And then for whatever reason that fell through, which is something we'll talk about at a later time. But yes, that was the last time I've heard anything in regards to this, unless somebody like these detectives who are coming out and trying to name Gary Post or Paul Doerr. You will occasionally see the FBI come out and make a little blurb or a press conference that no, the case is not closed. No, this suspect has not been identified as this individual. But it's a very small insert in comparison to the media and attention that these people receive when they're blaming the wrong person.
Right. And the other thing is these murders have never been solved. And
correct.
And up north, the murder count for Zodiac that he attributes to himself was always a lot higher than the murder count that the law enforcement attributed to Zodiac.
And I actually am going to discuss on my summary here how many murders we have to this point in Southern California versus how many up to Cheri Jo Bates that we have in Northern California. And we'll look at those numbers. Really quick, it says, after an examination of the murder site and surroundings, investigators began to put in place a picture of events which had taken place. Detectives believed that the assailant had first made Linda restrain Robert's hands behind his back with a piece of pre-cut rope, whilst holding her at gunpoint before the attacker himself began to tie up Linda. So this is very, very similar to what occurred, we believe, based on Brian Hartnell's recollections, is that the Zodiac made Cecilia Shepard tie up Brian Hartnell first, and then the attacker tied up Cecilia. So an extremely similar parallel there that is happening. Also, they stated that the killer then attempted to torch the shack before making his getaway. And if he had stuck around, he would have seen the fire fail to take hold, thus leaving behind several clues. 4 boxes of .22 caliber ammunition were found in the shack, along with a number of pre-cut bits of rope and some discarded matches. So that takes me back to the rope thing, obviously. And at some point, I'm hoping before we begin the Zodiac escapade that I have Jack Tarrance's son on, who actually will talk about this. But I did cut out an insert from Stephen Dewhurst's book. And this was basically Charles opportunity to talk a little bit about what he knew about his dad. And one of the excerpts that I pulled out was he used to carry pre-cut lengths of rope shorter than 3 feet, very, very specific information, in his vehicle all the time that were not long enough to tie stuff down with. He said, I remembered my dad.
One quick question. So this is not the son that was in the military, or it is? Or how many sons did he actually have?
No, he had, Jack had four children, I believe, 2 sons, 2 daughters from his first marriage. Then he married Nora, who had 1 son, 3 daughters, and they had another son together, which is Charles. And that's the one that I'm referring to now. And his recollection of being with his father, he always thought it was strange, obviously, to even bring this up and to mention it in a letter to Stephen Dewhurst. That he carried these pre-cut lengths of rope shorter than 3 feet in his vehicle. So it would be interesting to know how long these pieces of cord were that were used in either the Dominguez and Edwards or the Shepard and Hartnell
which is
cases.
very
Right. Yeah. So it also says the following day, the bodies of Dominguez and Edwards were discovered by highway patrolman Paul Schultz in a shack close to the beach, stacked on top of one another. And that stuck out in my mind because we have the murders of the 2 little girls in South Carolina in 1944, where the bodies were stacked on top of each other. And then he proceeded to stack their bicycle on top of them. So this stacking thing that's going on, I'm now hearing about it for a second time. And I thought that was extremely interesting. How many people take the time to kill something and then literally start stacking it up like a deck of cards?
Yeah, that's somewhat ritualistic. But also another point is the difference between Berryessa and what's the town again?
Gaviota.
Gaviota,
it's the Gaviota Beach area, but I think that they stated that it was 25 miles north of Santa Barbara.
Barbara,
yeah.
Beach. But my point is that both the people, he made sure both people were dead in the Santa Barbara area one, whereas, as we know, Hartnell lived in the Berryessa.
Right. And that's where things get a little bit interesting, obviously, is that, and also, I'm glad you brought that up, because in this particular case with Edwards and Domingos was actually the overkill. So that's quite the opposite from what we've seen in the Zodiac, where the females were the overkill. So that might also allude to them being the actual target. So Domingos was actually shot more times than Edwards was, and they were both shot at close range after being shot from a distance, which is also that sniper type feel, I guess. He chased her and shot her at a distance, but then obviously drug her body back to the shack. But again, this chasing of the victim when they hadn't even had an opportunity to see what he looked like, it almost reminds me of it's a required hit. It's something he has to do. He's not going to let these individuals get away.
Yeah, and he made sure they both died.
Correct.
I don't mean to laugh.
Yeah. No, I know. So basically what I did was look through some of the work that Stephen Dewhurst had done. I did actually pull up a couple more of the newspaper articles in regards to this case, just to give you an idea. It showed that the bullet-riddled bodies of Robert Domingos, 18, and Linda Edwards, who would have been 18 today, were found about 10 p.m. Wednesday in a crudely built hideaway. So we get to see these hideaways, and there was this actual letter that came out at some point in time, and I kind of dejected it as a false letter, but it talks about these hideaways and these shacks. So it may actually have some credence. It may very well have come from the actual Zodiac. I'm going to have to go back and visit that one and look at the handwriting and see if I can even determine where that letter came from. It originally came from Tom Voigt's website, but I'm not sure what I trust, considering he seems to constantly be steering the investigation in whatever direction he wants it towards whatever suspect he wants to talk about. So maybe we'll look at that later. I know that in Stephen Dewhurst's book, he did some heavy research on the Super X brand and the 22 long rifle that was in Jack's possession. He went so far as to have purchased a similar version to what Jack had, and then another model gun called the J.C. Higgins Model 80, noting that in these particular, the firing pin differences. So we can see to the left, this more square or angular firing pin indentation on the bullet head right here, and versus the JC Model Higgins, which is clearly a rounded, wider version of a firing pin. And he goes into great detail to talk about the research, the firing of the guns, what he found, the differences, how it would have been possible that this was a 22 long rifle. And I do believe actually that in this particular attack, it was. Let's see, they said in Lompoc, deputies were also checking out stores which sell the type of 22 caliber long rifle ammunition. So they are literally talking about long rifle, but in the Lake Berryessa murders, they were indicating that they believed that the gun was a J.C. Higgins Model 80. So if you're interested in this, you can get Stephen Dewhurst's book. In fact, I do actually, before I move on to that, I do actually have that information, and you can stop the presentation anytime you want on your end and look or read at these excerpts that I put in from Stephen's book. Either way, they showed that Domingos took 11 hits, Edwards took 8 hits. Again, leading back to the fact that he shot Domingos more times than he shot Edwards, would appear that he was the actual target. Here's some more excerpts from the actual book. After he applied that basic theory and application test to determine the likelihood of the gun used, he found that it was more likely that it came from a 22 long rifle, which we can see on the bottom rack of Jack's gun rack here, included with some of his pistols. This goes on to talk a little bit more about the different types of rifles. I want to say that, let's see. So Jack's favorite gun is a 22 caliber rifle. Jack had the gun until about the year 2000 when he had given it to his son, Denny. So now that goes back to that son you were asking me before, the one that we thought might have been a lookout for Jack at Lake Berryessa, may have been involved to some degree. He definitely was interested in killing and people at that. So when he went to Vietnam, he had wrote a letter back saying that it was paradise here because it was hunting season all year round. And I'm sure he wasn't talking about animals.
Correct. Yeah, there's speculation that he was an accomplice at various levels, at various murder sites, or even after the fact with some of the letters and whatnot.
Right.
The mailing of the letters.
Well, and one of the Lake Berryessa composites is very similar to him as well, which I found extremely interesting. I'm just kind of taking a second to flash through these. That way, if people want to pick them back up. I know that what he had indicated is that Jack had obtained this gun illegally. So it was a stolen gun that Jack took possession of, and it was actually a prototype for the company who made the 5.72 lightweight. It says the first year was 1958. This gun was produced. Let's see, was almost an exact match for the gun described as the murder weapon. The firing pin was located at 12 o'clock, and there were extractors at 3 o'clock and between 8 and 9 o'clock, just like the description in the report. So evidently he did follow what they talked about in regards to the shell casings left at the scene of the crimes in regards to these. Let's see. I'm going to see if I could figure out where yeah. So he also did purchase a J.C. Higgins, and he had determined that the firing pins and the extractor marks were more consistent with the long rifle than they were with the pistol. But that doesn't really knock it out of the park for Jack, because we also know that some of our previous murders, like the Texarkana Phantom murders and the Dania Beach murders, all contained either semi-automatic 22, a Colt 22. So that pistols, obviously, Jack liked the 22, I guess, because he said it was quiet. So here's just a little bit more information. And then finally at the end, the author notes the Remington 572 lightweight was a better match to the casings found at Lake Herman Road. Okay, so he's comparing this to Lake Herman than the J.C. Higgins model was, 80 was. So with the minor exception of the height of the firing pin. But if it was a prototype, he says that there could be that they were testing the different ranges for firing pins on this gun at that time, and that the one that in particular also could have been altered because Jack could have filed down easily that firing pin as well.
Correct.
So this brings us to the other murders you were talking about, and these ones were the ones that I was attempting to research to determine how valid it was that they could be a connection to Cheri Jo Bates. And this is, let's see. They did a possible link. Newlyweds Johnny and Joyce Swindle were both shot on the evening of February 5th, 1964. The couple, both 19 and from Jasper, Alabama, were in San Diego to enjoy their honeymoon. At just 8 p.m. or just after 8 p.m., the young couple were discovered along the boardwalk on Ocean Beach. Joyce Swindle was already dead when discovered, but her husband fought valiantly for his life. Tragically, he succumbed to his wounds later that night in the hospital. They indicated that the couple had been shot from a distance first. And then after being put down from a distance, the attacker then approached the couple and fired off a close range shot into the heads of both victims. So that's very mob-esque.
Yes, it is.
Despite
so first shoot from a distance and then to get up close and make sure they're dead by putting bullets in the head. That's quite like a mob.
Yeah, somebody wanted them to make sure they were dead. Shooting at a distance wasn't sufficient enough. Despite the execution style killings, detectives could find no one who held a grudge against the couple back in Alabama. Even though Johnny's wallet was taken, detectives also ruled out robbery as a motive. The murders, like those of Robert Dominguez and Linda Edwards, were never solved, and no official evidence to link the cases have ever been revealed between them. However, that's where we get into the interesting part of who Johnny Ray Swindle was. He was actually a radioman, petty officer, 3rd class in the U.S. Navy. So we have this tie back to the Navy again. He's also a radioman, which Jack is currently in 1964. He has already obtained his ham radio license a couple times, I believe, at this point. So I thought that was an interesting connection. It says that Johnny had decided to take leave from San Diego, which is where his duty station was. And we know that a lot of the murders in the LA area were located closely to other military camp. I'm going to call it a camp. I know that's not bases, where the suspect could quietly hop back onto base and be out of suspicion for these murders. It says that a gunman in hiding opened fire and shot Johnny and Joyce several times, disabling them. He then came up to them and shot each in the head. His weapon fired again was a .22 long rifle, hollow point bullets. So there's another, I mean, this is information they're giving us. So what are they not telling us when they make these connections, you know?
Right. Who knows? And I had a question. Did they have any evidence that his watch was taken?
Yes, and that's what we're going to get into here. A couple small points is I like that they actually listed it in the newspaper, a sniper's bullets cut them down from behind. Then they were shot in the head, close up, execution style. That literally describes everything that I just said. We have both the military training and experience with the ambush, and then we also have the mob style hit where they're executed up close and personal. Slain were okay. 5 shots were fired.
The killer had to know their path too, because if he was hiding, waiting for them, he had to know they left and were going to come back or something. Otherwise, he could sit there waiting for hours.
Right. And that would be another one of my questions is how is it that there's nobody else on this beach? You know, how often do you see a beach that's empty in the LA area?
Yeah. Well, San Diego area. Yeah.
Well, yeah, in Southern California, you get into those beaches, there's a lot of people there. It says on the ledge of the retaining wall, police found a box of Valentine candy. I haven't really assimilated that to anything or a style that the Zodiac used. But if this was a piece of evidence that was stolen from another crime and then left at this one, that might explain it. Police assume the Swindles bought the candy while on their stroll, but they said it could have been left behind by a deranged killer's calling card. So I'm going to have to look into that a little bit more and see if there's anything that I missed throughout, because I've never seen this murder before, researching the Cheri Jo Bates stuff. So here I actually did the same thing, Nolan. I searched Swindle. I searched Johnny Ray Swindle. I searched his wife's name. And look what I come up with. Frank Sinatra, Machine Gun Kelly, John Dillinger, Jonestown, Bugsy Siegel, COINTELPRO, Black Dahlia, Jimmy Hoffa, National Airlines Flight 967 once again comes up in relation. Solo, once again, which was related to Domingos. And then George H.W. Bush, part 1 of 1. So I don't know what file the FBI has on Bush, but it would be interesting to know why he was investigated for anything or what that was about. Also, when I did Johnny Swindle, so I added his first name to it. I'm sorry. So when I did just Swindle, we also found Fair Play for Cuba Committee, Salvatore Bonanno, D.B. Cooper, and Charles Lucky Luciano and Salvatore Luciana. When I actually added Johnny's name to it, I came up with a much smaller search list. You can see here just in this center box. And that came up with John Dillinger, the Bremer kidnapping. Again, that was mob related. I had seen Bremer kidnapping follow so many of these searches that I've done that I actually took a look at it to see what was going on. And that was the Barker and what was that guy? Barker and Karpus gang.
Alvin Karpus, the G-Man.
Yep. So here we have, again, Jimmy Hoffa, National Airlines Flight 967, Salvatore Bonanno, and Charles Lucky Luciano all come up under just Johnny Swindle. When I ran Joyce Swindle, I came up with an even lower amount, but you can see Bremer kidnapping again, Jonestown. I don't know why Bernie Madoff is coming up in connection with these. We know that there's lots of years between those people. But also finally at the end, the Barker Karpus gang. So I just noted that, again, when I did just Joyce Swindle, and I don't know, maybe the word swindle comes up in here, but I did read through some of these files, especially the Bremer kidnapping, to see if I could locate if that was a key word that was being used within the text that would actually derive this type of a query from a search, but I couldn't find anything like that. So that brings me to the kidnapping of Edward Bremer, who was kidnapped. And of course, it says, let's see, though successful in netting the gang a large ransom, it brought down the full force of the FBI on the gang, resulting in the death or capture of its main members in the months afterwards. So that's the kidnapping of Edward Bremer. And I keep seeing it, so I just had to do some research and see what it said. But one of the actual newspaper articles also tried to link the Swindle murders to another man in Phoenix, Arizona. And we know that Jack's constant path from Texas back through California always took him right through Arizona. So I wouldn't discount if they found something similar in another state, but it was interesting to see these states were actually acting in they were acting together to put this information together, but we couldn't even get Southern California to put things together with Northern California. So another one of those linkage blindness things, but obviously Phoenix was not being blinded by the possibility that the people that were that the Swindles that were killed in California had some relation to an Edward R. Sands. So, and of course, shot again on Oceanside Parkway is going to actually take us right on into the next murder. Let's see. Oh, here's that point that you were talking about. Sorry. Information is but put forth that the Zodiac Killer took items from one crime and dropped it in another crime. This statement below actually alludes to the same thing. This may be the additional evidence that is consistent between these cases that neither Riverside PD or Santa Barbara PD would comment on. But it says back to the Swindle case, Johnny's Timex watch was missing. He had been painting to earn extra money outside of his military job, and the Timex found near Bates had paint flecks and was supposedly purchased at a PX, some reports say in the UK. So there it is. That's the information that we have that suggests there's a possible connection between this murder and Cheri Jo Bates.
That's pretty strong evidence.
Right. It says
the Timex, they thought it was the killer's, that she had wrested it off the killer's wrist during the struggle. But other people like you and I have suspicions that it was a memento, or just tying the crimes together in his head, kind of like to mess with people again. Just these weird little clues that we know Jack and whoever did the murders down south, if it was Jack, but to link a prior crime with the next crime.
Correct. And so if he ripped this off obviously he's not going to take the time to cleanly or nicely take it off of the individual he's just killed, but he took the time to take his wallet, which we did see in a couple other cases. Back in Black Dahlia, we had one of the he wasn't killed, but he was accosted and his wallet was taken. And then the Black Dahlia Avenger, if you will, proceeded to use his pictures, claiming that he would be next or that he was the actual killer. So we saw that ploy occur. They did say that the little-known 1969 Astro magazine with a strong hint to San Diego, also a Flight 555 United, as per a reporter who discovered this, took off every day at 7:30 p.m. from San Francisco to San Diego. And obviously this is a quick hop, right? About 45 minutes to an hour, 15 minutes flight, basically.
Yes.
And if Jack was still part of the military during some of these things, then he would have access to flights. But I tend to think that he had some personal aviators or some personal pilots on hand as well. The Zodiac enjoyed dual meanings. So when he said in this particular paste up, watch, that could either mean watch what I'm doing or look for a watch, which we've seen or notated now in several cases. And here is that watch. So basically the two to the left in black and white were the ones found at the Cheri Jo Bates crime scene. This one here is just a color representation of it. It would be interesting to know who actually obtained this color photo of this watch laying on the ground, or if they recolored it, because I'm not sure that they had color photography in 1966. I don't know. Just a thought.
They did, but I think at crime scenes at that time, they were black and white.
Yeah, two of them are black and white, and that shows it not even at the crime scene. And then the one that they're making it appear as those at the crime scene is literally in color. So that brings us to one last murder. Hopefully we can make it through it the next 3 minutes. And that is Ray Davis on April 10th of 1962. So now we're going back even two more years, but it's back in the Oceanside area in an elite neighborhood, just like Paul Stine was killed in San Francisco. Ray, 27, was a cabbie in Oceanside, California. At 11:10 p.m., he notified his dispatcher that he had picked someone up and was on his way to a location in South Oceanside. However, his body was found early next morning in an upscale neighborhood. Ray had been shot twice from the back seat of the cab, which is consistent with Paul Stine. One to the back and one to the head. Again, execution style. His body was dumped in an alley and the killer escaped the scene in the cab. Now, for whatever reason, a lot of the murders we've discussed already in the LA area, the suspect actually took off in the car, and whether it ran out of gas a few miles away or he just dumped it a few miles away, the car was never too far away, as if the killer was trying to get out of town. It was almost as if he was just moving the vehicle around so it would take longer for the body to be discovered. Let's see. Not long after Ray was killed, the killer had called beforehand, warned him he was going to be committing the murder. Then not long after Ray was killed, the killer called again and threatened to kill a random bus driver. So now we have, obviously, a cabbie and a bus in the mix, which is very Zodiac-esque. There are similarities between the murders of the Zodiac Killer and Ray's murder. Shooting a cabbie to death in the wealthiest neighborhood of a city, called to say he would commit a baffling crime, and called the police to take credit for the murder. Contacting the police to warn of future murders, claims he will kill a bus driver. openly stating his intent was to baffle the police. And we know that the Zodiac also liked to baffle and play with the police, making a bust the subject of a death threat and displaying no obvious motive for the murder. So some people think that Ray was killed by the Zodiac. Others think the Zodiac learned of the Davis case and decided to copy it. But I know that if this is all Jack, he's been doing it long before 1962. And in a letter from the Zodiac in 1971, he claimed he had many undiscovered victims in the Southern California area, and one of them could very well be Ray Davis. Oh my goodness. All right, well, that pretty much puts us at the end of this presentation. I hope everybody has a wonderful weekend. Thank you for joining me, Nolan. We could pick this back up. I thought we'd be through more to the end so we can talk about the summary of the evidence, but obviously we can get to that next week.
Yes, that'd be great. I see the name Steve Hodel.
We'll get to him. Yeah, we
Yeah.
don't have time for that one today, but we'll get to him. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.